the 11th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52, and if Crystal could lead us in the pledge. Thank you. Our first order of business for this evening would be to act on the minutes of February 3rd. Any errors or omissions noted in those? Seeing none, we'll accept those under general consent. That brings us to communications. Kim.
Thank you. I would like to report the following resignations. Julie Schmidt, Leavitt Area High School instructional coach, effective February 18. Brooke LaChance, Tripp Middle School Special Education BSP Ed Tech 2, effective February 4. This person did accept the TMS Special Education BSP Ed Tech 3 position, which is great. Chris Marston, Leavitt Area High School varsity girls basketball coach. I would also like to report the following transfers. Romeo Morissette, Turner Elementary School evening custodian to day custodian. That was effective February 4. And Linda Cloutier, Leavitt Area High School evening custodian to Turner Elementary School evening custodian, effective also on February 4th.
Thank you. So that brings us to item number 4, which is the budget work session. And I think, Superintendent Brandt, you have a slideshow. Should board members move to the comfortable seating here?
Yes, please. I think that would be best.
Thank you.
All right, to begin with the overview of the FY23 budget process, our process involves our administrators and directors working with their staffs to identify needs and then putting together budgets for each school and each department. Those administrators then meet individually with Business Manager Flanagan and with me to review the budget. That gives us the opportunity to understand what the needs are across the district and to ask clarifying questions. Business Manager Flanagan then puts together the budgets, and we work as an administrative team to take a look at all of the needs across the district and to prioritize the top needs that need to go into the initial proposed FY23 budget. So the presentation that you're about to see is a summary of what those needs are for FY23. So tonight I will present an overview, and then our administrators will present their executive summaries. Okay, so last year when I began my budget presentation, I said that it had been a year like no other, and I can say the same thing for this year. There is no playbook for public education in a pandemic. We continue to face many challenges, and as a team, we continue to meet every challenge with a solution. We have good reasons to celebrate, and here are just a very few of those. We have students in school 5 days each week. That's huge after the past year and a half. We also are seeing academic progress in the state assessment, which is the NWEA, from the fall to the winter. We expect to see that progress, and we are seeing it. And you'll hear more about that. But it's exactly what we wanted, and that's good. Food service continues to provide meals for all who need them, and food service has done this since day one. And then the district is making strategic purchases with the ESSER funding to offset budget impact in future years. So when we take a look at our ESSER funding and we look at our district needs, we ask questions like, which things are a direct result of COVID impact? They have to be in order to use the ESSER funding. And which of those things will also be things that we're likely to put as requests in future budgets? So we make purchases where we have the intersection between those two. So as far as the development of the initial proposed budget, there are many things that go into that we need to consider. We consider our mission, and the mission of the MSAD 52 school community is to provide excellence in education. Students will become responsible citizens and lifelong learners as a result of the teaching and learning in safe, respectful environments. We also consider the strategic plan. The pandemic has pulled us off course with the strategic plan, but it's something that we spent a lot of time thinking on, and we will be getting back to it. I want to share just two things to remind everybody from the strategic plan. The number one strength that our communities told us we have as a district is caring, effective educators. This is huge. This is really the base of what we do and why we exist. So to have community members name that as the number one strength of the district is wonderful. The number one request was for more opportunities for students to experience hands-on experiential learning. And we are doing that, but it's so good for children that parents wanted more of that. And you will hear about plans for more of that through this budget process. We also have to consider student academic, social, emotional, and physical needs, and the non-academic necessities, such as safe transportation and maintaining facilities. There's also consideration of the rising costs of goods and services. A couple of small examples would be, well, not so small examples would be that diesel this year is at $2.12 a gallon, but is expected to be at $3 a gallon next year. The cost of tires is up 20%. Also, enrollment and class sizes have to be considered. Our October 1st, 2020 enrollment was 1,912 students. That was a reduction of about 90 students from 2019. This past fall's October 1st count was 1,917 students, so up 5 students from last year. Contractual obligations always must be considered. Contractual obligations are the negotiated salaries and benefits of employees. And in any school budget, about 80% of that budget reflects the cost of employees. And then there are changes in state subsidy from year to year. This year we have some good news in state subsidy. Our state subsidy is actually up 1.1 million over what it was for this current year, which helps to offset costs of requests. Our district continues to spend less per pupil than the state average. You can see there state average at $12,442.95, and our district at $10,863.01. The data is from 18-19, that's the most recent that they have. I keep watching to see when they're going to update that. But this has been a trend over many years. And in the budget booklet that goes home to all families, I have a chart that shows over time that the state average is generally higher than what SAD 52's per pupil expenditure is. So school funding, there's state subsidy, and Maine uses the Essential Programs and Services School Funding Model called EPS. It is defined as the most essential programs and resources that students need in order to have an equitable opportunity to achieve Maine's learning results. So it's not lots and tons of extras, it is only the most essential things needed for students to have an equitable opportunity to meet the Maine learning results. The EPS formula determines both the state and local share of school funding. The ED 279 is the report that shows us the state's calculation for funding public education, and it informs districts of their funding for the next year. It is enrollment driven. Enrollment is based on the most recent 2 October 1st counts. And again, we have an increase in subsidy this year, which is good news for us. As far as the local share goes, the required local share must be raised in order to access the state subsidy. It's based on the percentage of students in each town as well as valuation. And valuation is provided by the Maine Revenue Service, and it determines the town's ability to pay the local share. The mill rate for FY23 will be 7.1. That is down from this current year, which was 7.26. So context, this current year we did some prepaids to the tune of $560,000 with money from the previous year related to some savings related to the pandemic. That $560,000 must go back into the budget for next year. Again, there are increases in the cost of goods and services. Health insurance is budgeted at 10%, or approximately $368,000. We generally don't find out the final number increase for insurance until pretty late in the budget process. There are increases in contractual obligations, again, the negotiated salaries and benefits. And we see an increase in students' needs as well, which makes sense because we were in the hybrid model all last year. Again, the increase in subsidy will help offset costs. So this initial budget proposal will include a recommendation related to the carry forward, requests by warrant article, and there are some considerations for the board that are not included in this initial proposed budget, but need to be discussed. So beginning with warrant article 1, regular instruction, we are requesting 1 kindergarten teacher at Turner Primary School. That's based on projected enrollment. A 0.2, or 1 day a week, physical education teacher at GCS, and that is to provide equitable opportunities for PE for all students at that school. We are requesting 1 EdTech 2 at TES to work with students. 1 office assistant that would be split between Turner Primary School and Turner Elementary School, and that would bring the office staffing level closer to even among all of our schools. We are requesting a half-time library ed tech 1 at Leavitt Area High School. Leavitt Area High School used to have a full-time ed tech in the library. That was cut years ago. We do now have a half-time person there, but we'd really like to increase that by half-time to a full-time person to offer students more opportunities in the library and more time when they can access it. We want to continue with the Jobs for Maine Graduates program at the high school. That has been in place, I believe, for 4 years now. I'm looking at Evan, 4 years? Yes, 4 years now. And that is really important to support students at risk with aspirations and choices going forward. That has been funded by a grant for the past 4 years, and the cost is generally $25,000 after that time. However, JMG program is willing to work with us and give us a ramp up. So the cost for FY23 would be $12,500. We are requesting 1 EdTech 3 for an in-school suspension monitor, and I've got /learning support at Leavitt Area High School. This would be another person to help students who need the additional help with completing work, with questions, and of course with in-school suspension. And keeping children in school as much as possible and being able to support them to continue their work is a good thing. We are asking for 3 instructional coaches. We currently have 1 instructional coach at TPS, 1 at TES, and 1 at Leavitt Area High School. And that was the one big thing we had in our strategic plan from several years back, was to work toward having an instructional coach in each school. So we are asking to meet that goal and bring an instructional coach in at GCS, at LCS, and also at TMS. You'll hear more about the instructional coaches. They are a wonderful support for teachers as we are supporting children, and I feel like at this point they're more critical than ever before. There are a couple of corresponding decreases, and those include eliminating 1 teaching position at Leeds. There will be a retirement that will not be filled because the enrollment does not need us to do that. And eliminate 1 EdTech 3 at TMS because the learning lab there can be run by 3. Moving on to special education warrant article 4. we're requesting a .4 speech-language pathologist to bring a current .6 up to full-time to meet student needs. Also, 1 school psychologist, again, to meet student needs. 1 EdTech 2 for the autism program at Turner Primary School, and 1 EdTech 2 for the autism program at Turner Elementary School. In other instruction, warrant Article 4, we're requesting a stipend, a small stipend for Tripp Middle School game day manager. Janet will be talking more about that as we go through the process. A scoreboard for the TMS multi-purpose field, which is badly needed. And a small stipend for unified bocce at the high school. As you know, we have had unified basketball at the high school now for several years with great success. So we'd like to expand that. For student and staff support, warrant Article 5, we are requesting 1 gifted and talented teacher. That would mean that we would have 2 total gifted and talented teachers. There would be a corresponding decrease because we would also eliminate 1 gifted and talented EdTech 3. For systems administration and school administration, there are no big changes there other than contractual obligations. Business Manager Flanagan will talk to you a little bit later about transportation and facilities and debt service. Warrant Article 14, food service. So for this current year, this was a decrease in this warrant article. Food service had been asking for $70,000 a year for several years. For this current year, Dave asked for $50,000, so it's a $20,000 decrease. For FY23, he is asking for $0. So again, a decrease in the budget. Adult education, Mr. Brito will be talking about adult education a little bit later this evening. So as far as a bit of a summary, we are recommending that the board maintain a carry forward of $555,000, which is what it was for this current year as well. And for board consideration, and these things I'm about to say are not included in this initial proposed budget, but they're things I believe the board will want to discuss. That would be consideration of an increase in the technology reserve, an increase in the facilities reserve, and we have 3 instructional coaches in ESSER for next year, but that is all. Then they must come back into the general budget, so consideration about that as well. I thought it would be helpful to see a history of the tax impact over the last several years. So current proposal is an overall tax impact to our communities of 3.8%. This current year it was 3.64%, and then remember that we received the unanticipated additional subsidy, and the board voted to give $300,000 of that back to the towns to lessen tax impact. FY21, it was a 0%. FY20, a 1.8%, and that's when that state-funded debt service of close to $900,000 fell off. FY19, 4.08%. FY18, 4.92%, and FY17, 6.16%. So the board budget workshop dates are here for all. This evening is the overview and the executive summaries. On March 3rd, the board will go line by line with warrant Article 1, regular instruction, and warrant Article 2, special education. On March 10th, there'll be a revisit of 1 and 2, and the board will go line by line through transportation, facilities maintenance, debt service, and food service. Food service will be very easy this year. March 24th, the board will revisit warrant Article 8, 9, 10, and 14, and then do line by line over other instruction, student and staff support, system-wide administration, and school administration, as well as adult education. March 31st will be the day when the board adopts the final proposed FY23 budget. And on April 7th, the board will vote to call for a district budget meeting on May 5th. and the budget validation referendum on May 19th. The board will also sign the budget warrant that evening. April 14th is a date in case something happens, whether weather-related or what have you, and we need to have another meeting. We have that one in the calendar in case. And again, just a reminder that on May 5th is the district budget vote at 6 p.m. right here in the auditorium at the high school. And on May 19th is the budget validation referendum at local polling places.
So at this time, we would move into the executive summaries, is that correct?
Yes.
So I think board members, I know the seats were much more comfortable out there, right? Understand?
All right, good evening. Thank you, Superintendent Brandt. That was an excellent overview, and I appreciate the opportunity to get to speak about Warrant Article 1 at the elementary level. Warrant Article 1 relates to regular instruction, and Superintendent Brandt mentioned a variety of items that have been placed in the budget to support student needs and enrollment needs across the elementary schools. Turner Primary School is asking for a kindergarten teacher to support the enrollment needs. We currently have 74 students in our pre-K program, and we typically average 15 new students who did not participate in pre-K, and so that makes a number large for 4 classroom teachers. And we do have a class size policy as well, and so the hope would be to add a 5th kindergarten teacher to support the current enrollment needs at Turner Primary School. Turner Elementary School and Turner Primary School are also asking for an office assistant, as Superintendent Brent mentioned, to make it comparable across other schools, but also to address the transportation needs of our schools, the documentation needs of our school as far as student records, attendance needs at each of our schools, and then just managing the day-to-day operations within the office. So the hope would be that that position would increase from half-time at each school to a full-time. Green Central School in the proposal is adding a physical education teacher, .2, which ends up being 1 day a week. And we provide physical education to our students in grades 1 through 6. Students receive 2 classes a week of physical education for 40 minutes. And so in order to meet those needs at Green Central School, the hope is to add a physical education teacher 1 day a week. Superintendent Brandt also mentioned that there is an Ed Tech 2 at Turner Elementary School for student support that has been added into the budget. And finally, part of our strategic plan is around ensuring that we have instructional coaches in all of our elementary schools as well as our middle school and our high school. And Turner Primary School currently has an instructional coach we have over the last 3 years, and the position has been extremely critical and valued, enhancing and elevating the professional capital of our teachers, as well as ensuring we have a great understanding of standards, and then working together to meet the needs of students through co-teaching, co-planning. Those are all called teaching cycles. And so this proposal includes adding 3 additional instructional coaches, 1 at Leeds Central School, 1 at Green Central School, and 1 at Tripp Middle School. And I believe Jan's principal mates will talk a little bit about the instructional coach at the middle school. Does anyone have any questions about the elementary portion of Warrant Article 1, regular instruction?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jana Mates, principal at Tripp Middle School. As Ryan had mentioned, Tripp Middle School is also requesting an instructional coach, not only to support the professional development within our building, but to help with the vertical alignment of K-12 across the district, which we're in desperate need of. In addition, we have requested funds to replace 2 photocopiers. I believe it's lease purchase, which would be a wash, but I can get into that further when we move on. A small increase in funding for instructional supplies, books, and the addition of field trips and transportation for field trips back into the budget that was cut last year in order to support the middle school's efforts for hands-on experiential learning. Any questions about Tripp Middle School's request?
Thank you.
Good evening. The proposed portion of warrant Article 1 for Leavitt Area High School maintains our current program offerings. The high school portion also includes funds for the purchase of Chromebooks for our incoming 9th graders, as well as the increased support in the library by moving from half-time to a full-time ed tech position in that role. Warrant Article 1 also includes the instructional software needed in the various content areas around the building, as well as the licensing for the new Mac computers that were purchased last year by the trustees. Additionally, this warrant article includes funds to replace equipment around the building. Last year, I mentioned the need for a new surface planer in the wood shop that was new when the school was new in 1969. So it's time for a new one down there. So it includes a surface planer for the wood shop, robotics equipment, and some sewing machines that are also about 25 years old. So they're pretty ragged. So there's some equipment needs around the building that are included in this warrant article.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. My name is Rebecca Drysdale. I'm the Director of Special Education here in the district. Tonight I'm going to share our department summary, which I think is either 3 or 4, probably 3, warrant article. We're going to the department summary with you and draw your attention to budget reductions and increases. Annually, the special ed department examines efficiencies across the district, and in doing so, we've made adjustments to meet our FAPE obligations with students with individual education plans. Reductions include the cost of one out-of-district placement as the student is graduating. We have our contracted speech and language service will be reduced by actually adding 0.4 to a 0.6 district position in response to student needs. We have reduced staff travel to represent online and district training provided to our staff. You will see an increase in the budget with our contractual obligations, which are required positions to meet our obligations under FAPE. You'll see the increase of a full-time school psychologist position from contracted services. This position has been added back into the budget due to the increase for student needs for evaluations, psychological consultation, and counseling district-wide. And then the 2 additional ed tech positions within our autism support programs in order to meet the needs of our additional students who have moved into our district. When you review the budget, you'll also notice some of our staffing lines increase and decrease, which they do every year. As a matter of efficiency, we move staff across the department to meet our expected needs. Thank you for your time this evening. And are there any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That pause must mean that we're at warrant article 4. So, warrant article 4 is other instruction. It includes co-curricular activities, athletics, and summer school. And I'm going to speak to the high school portion of this. The co-curricular portion of this particular article maintains current programming, and there are no new requests in that area for this year. The athletics portion of the article reflects a slight increase over the current year, The proposal includes funds to begin offering unified bocce, as well as transportation costs associated with co-op swimming. The warrant article includes a request for new portable soccer goals to replace the existing set that have become unrepairable. And this year's request also includes $7,000 for next year's state Nordic ski meet, which is scheduled to take place in Augusta County. There is a decrease in this area to reflect a decreased need in 504 compliance, and we are not requesting, last year you might recall that we were requesting new cheering mats. We are not requesting new cheering mats at approximately $7,000. We were able to purchase those mats with existing funds this year, so we did not need to include them in our request. At 9 to 12 summer school, the proposal maintains current levels for summer school offerings.
Thank you.
Also looking at warrant article 4 for the 7 and 8 co-curricular. This portion of the article maintains current programming, and there is no budget requests. 7 and 8 athletic and individual sports reflects an increase. We are requesting a new multi-purpose scoreboard. The current one does not work. It hasn't for some time. And the position of a game day manager stipend. There is a small decrease in coaching stipends as a result of hiring some newer coaches whose stipend warrants less than those that were in like a seniority position. There's also a slight increase in individual sports to replace safety equipment, specifically football helmets and shoulder pads. And the 7-8 summer school budget remains the same.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Teresa Gillis, the Assistant Superintendent, and I am speaking on Warrant Article 5, formerly known as Warrant Article 7. The proposal in this, as was mentioned by Superintendent Brandt, is to add a full-time teaching position to support our gifted and talented program, while at the same time eliminating a full-time EdTech 3 position. The rationale for this is the increase in students. We currently have 113 students identified across 5 schools. And part of the challenge with scheduling is that these schools are on 2 different schedules. There's a middle and high school schedule, and then there's the elementary school, and they're in 3 different towns. By adding a teacher, we believe we will better be able to support the needs of our students. Any questions?
Thank you.
For warrant articles 6 and 7, as I said during the overview, there are no additional requests made in those warrant articles. There are some changes due to contractual obligations only.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. First, I'll talk about warrant article number 8 for transportation. And some of the highlights here for this article. The total article is up approximately 12%. And we have included in here 2 new 77-passenger buses. And this is on a 5-year lease purchase. And this is a program to the state of Maine, the DOE, where they will pay approximately 80% of the principal cost of the bus over that 5-year period. And we get that back through the ED 279. And the new buses will certainly provide more reliable transportation and become more cost effective as some of our fleet gets older has mechanical issues and rust. So unfortunately, rust has been an issue probably over the last 10 years that I'm aware of. Driver salaries have increased due to the contractual obligations, and I am pleased to report that we do have a full complement of drivers out there right now. So keep my fingers crossed that our good fortune continues. Bus maintenance services are forecast to increase by approximately 5%, and the parts are forecast to increase by approximately 8%. And while that doesn't seem too outrageous at this point in time, we still have to keep in mind that we do have supply chain issues getting parts from time to time. Our budgeted cost for our tires, unfortunately, that one is, I'm forecasting that to increase by approximately 20%, which is roughly $7,000. Gasoline increase forecast to be about 18%. And our diesel fuel, which if you'll remember, coming into this year, we had some prepaid diesel on account, and that was a cost per gallon of $2.12. We are forecasting that that same diesel product is going to cost us $3 a gallon, so it's quite an increase right there. And the other piece related to buses and vehicles, our fleet insurance has increased by $7,500, or approximately 24%, and that's a result of the higher vehicle values. And just to bring it to your attention, a bus right now costs I'll say average $100,000. So that's kind of where we are. That same bus, approximately 18 months ago, probably could have gotten that for just under $90,000. So we've seen a number of increases out there. Any questions? I'll move on to facilities.
Thank you.
So with our facilities are up quite a bit this year, approximately 24%. And a large part of that is, if you remember, we had prepaids in, let's see, FY21, so we didn't have to have the cost in FY22, the current year. Those totaled up approximately $560,000. So those obligations are still there. So they're coming back into the budget for this year. So you'll see a number of those pieces. And as we get further into the workshop, I can certainly give some detail to those. Some things I wanted to make you aware of as well in terms of cost increases. Energy, as we all know, is going quite a bit on the upward side. Forecasting propane costs to go up by 10%. Electricity, and I've seen different values out there in the news media reported. We're coming in at around 10% as an increase. While it's not great, it could be worse. Heating oil is somewhere between 10 and 12%. Unfortunately, we don't use a lot of heating oil at this point. Again, I mentioned the diesel fuel and those costs. And also related to facilities, working with MSMA, all of our property insurance is going up an average of 20%. Some good news, it seems like I've given you nothing but gloom and doom here. Some good news is our wood chip contract for our wood boiler, we've got a flat contract for that at $71 a ton, and that's for starting this year and going for 3 years. I will say that wood boiler has saved us significantly on heating costs. Any questions on that?
Thank you.
Debt service. Yeah, debt service is down just slightly. We have the one bond that will be maturing in 2025. So our decrease, I believe, was around $11,000. Yeah, just over $11,000 as far as the decrease for this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Roberts. I'm the Food Service Director for the district, and I'm presenting on Article 14, Food Service, which was formerly known as Article 13. So, as a general overview, I just want to acknowledge that in many ways, 22, 23 marks kind of a new beginning for food service, looking back on 2 years of pandemic impacted operations. Our department reinvention was necessitated by the initiation of remote feeding, which at the beginning was strictly parent pickup and at-home meal deliveries. That evolved into summer feeding, which was new for us, which morphed into providing meals both at school and at home during a hybrid school model. And then ultimately that shifted to establishing pandemic compliant meal services for in-person student populations at all of our locations. So the team did a great job meeting those challenges. We feel that we've emerged stronger, more efficient, and more resilient as a department. In many ways, the challenges of the pandemic highlighted the importance of our nutrition programs within our school communities. And thanks to increased meal participation across the board, supplemental programs like our summer programs and after-school meals, as well as increased physical support provided by UCA, we're no longer dealing with operational fiscal deficits. Total monthly revenues are running nearly double what they were pre-pandemic, which is allowing us to reinvest in our kitchens by progressively upgrading essential equipment, adjusting staffing models to meet increasing demands of meal production. So consequently, as we heard earlier, we're not going to be asking for a local subsidy this year or for any years in the foreseeable future, it looks like. It might be noted at this time that Governor Mills, in revealing her budget plan this month, perhaps you saw the clips, she included a pledge to fully fund bipartisan legislation that was passed in the Senate and the House in Maine to effectively eliminate student meal payment categories. Perhaps you've heard about that. What that means is every public school student in the state of Maine will receive their future school meals free of charge, which is great news for parents and families, and that's true even after the UCA removes their funding support. So that assures operators like me of robust support and high participation rates going forward, so we're really optimistic about that. When you eventually get your line-by-line budget, you'll see some increases, of course, due to the increased meal counts. So staffing increases are related to growth in production demands, as well as incremental salary increases based on contracted negotiations and insurance costs. You'll see lines for substitute labor, which is calculated on a 3-year average, and you'll see an increase in the director's salary and benefits. We're changing that from an academic year to a full calendar year contract just because of the demands of the job, and there's a proposal detailing information about that as well. On the equipment repair and purchase lines, you're going to see funds allocated proportionate to the age and condition of our equipment. Refrigeration units and boilers require ongoing maintenance. There's money set aside for that. There's money set aside for routine service calls as well. And there's modest contingency plans for things that happen when you least expect them to happen. We do have 3 proposals for equipment purchases across the district, and each one has a corresponding proposal that provides information. Convection ovens at Levitt Area High School, a dishwasher at Turner Primary School, and a dishwasher at Green Central School. In projecting food and other costs, of course, we've increased those based on our increased meal counts. We've increased those because of commodity markets are going up, and we've also put in contingency amounts because of some ongoing supply chain issues. What happens with our bid awardees, when they can't provide the products we need, we have to buy off bid from other vendors, and that comes at a higher cost. Total budget impact, though, as was mentioned before, in 21-22, we asked for a $50,000 local subsidy. We're not asking for one this year, so the total impact of the budget is negative $50,000, and any and all expenses incurred are expected to be covered 100% by our department revenues. Any questions about the summary? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Brian Brito, Director of Adult and Community Education, and brought you my first executive summary. A little nervous, sorry. Some highlights. There are obviously, as you've heard from other people, some personal adjustments that you'll find in the line by line of our budget. Some things that have changed. MSAD 52 has created a partnership with Central Maine Community College, in which we are going to be preparing students for college access throughout the county. And so we'll have increased advising and intake costs for that. We're also adding additional technology in terms of Chromebooks to continue to support students in remote learning, and some increased tuition costs in order to accommodate certification requirements of staff. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Should I turn that back over to you, Kim, at this point?
Sure, I'm just going to check something.
And those executive summaries, we will have written copies of those when board members receive budget books as well. So just in case anyone's note-taking abilities are similar to mine, and reinterpreting that chicken scratch can be challenging.
Business Manager Flanagan's got the budget books for board members, so you can get those now.
Okay, great, thank you. And that would be item 4.1.4, distribution of the initial budget books. So board members, from a process standpoint, board members will have the opportunity to take the budget books home this evening. And as our next meeting is March 3rd, certainly gives folks an opportunity to review those, and if there are any questions in anything contained therein, certainly can reach out to Superintendent Brandt and Business Manager Flanagan, and be prepared for our line-by-line review of each of those warrant articles when we, as scheduled from our slide earlier. So with the ceremonial presentation of the budget books, that brings us to the conclusion of the work session on the 22-23 budget for this evening, and we will continue that consideration in the upcoming meetings beginning on March 3rd with line-by-line consideration of warrant articles 1 and 2. That brings us to item number 5, adjustment to the agenda. Do we have any adjustments?
We do not.
That brings us to committee reports. Finance, Yuri. PTB, Jessica.
We have not met.
Curriculum policy, Joanne.
We did meet. Tuesday night. We had a presentation from instructional coaches. We talked about 2 mandatory policies. One is post-secondary enrollment options. The other is weapons, violence, and school safety. And then we talked about 3 that are not mandatory that we decided to keep. Questioning and searches of students, the policy and the regulations, and staff conduct with students are the 3 that are not mandatory, but we're keeping.
Thank you. That brings us to student representatives report. Tristan.
As last reported on the student representatives report, Winter Carnival is looking to progress slightly up.
Can folks hear Tristan?
No.
Let me share a microphone with you.
All right. As last reported on in the student representatives report, Winter Carnival is looking to progress mostly to normal, slightly modified. And since Winter Carnival is set to be tomorrow and no sudden changes have yet been announced, things do look to be on schedule. And all of the events that were scheduled will be going on. The spirit shown by the students in this activity reveals a positive amount of participation and excitement. As a representative, I feel confident in the quality of this year's Winter Carnival. On another note, the current season of athletics is going to be wrapping up soon. All sports that have them are in or shortly will be in playoffs. That concludes the student representative's report.
Thanks, Tristan, and best of luck to everyone in the various Winter Carnival activities. Saw the tables out by the entrance to the auditorium. I wasn't sure whether a little table tennis game might break out, or probably not, though. 6.5, Administrator Report. We do not have one since we've heard from folks earlier in the budget session. Superintendent's Report. Kim.
Yes, thank you. This afternoon, I sent out an MSAD 52 update because a lot has happened yesterday in particular. There was a Maine CDC press conference that happened at 2 o'clock, and information was shared about the COVID test kits that are free and available to all Maine families. Dr. Shaw announced several important changes to the standard operating procedures, and he also provided information about CDC's next steps related to the recommendation for masking in schools. So the most pertinent information is that the Maine CDC is encouraging all families to take advantage of the free test kits that are available to everyone, and encouraging or recommending that people test after the February break before coming back to school if possible. In that update, I put out the website where people can go to sign on and order their free test kits. Contact tracing is, the word is uncoupled from universal masking in the standard operating procedure now. While schools can choose to continue contact tracing if it's feasible, they are no longer required to do so. It is not feasible in MSAD 52 to contact trace. Masking is a requirement for any positive cases of COVID-19 returning to school or work in the 6 to 10 day window after a confirmed diagnosis or symptom onset. And that's at all times. And the Maine CDC is carefully monitoring the federal CDC's talking points on making changes to masking recommendations for school settings. Dr. Shaw said that if there are no changes next week, and there is a continued positive trend related to COVID case counts in Maine, that the CDC will begin having conversations that could establish plans for moving toward a masking optional recommendation for schools in Maine. Dr. Shaw also said that often after school vacations there is a spike, so he just wants to watch that, but it could be as early as the first week in March that we know of something that changes as far as CDC recommendations. Also, there is a federal transportation requirement for everyone to wear masks, and this includes school transportation, and that is in effect until March 18th. So, of course, the district will maintain that requirement because it's a federal transportation requirement on all school transportation. And the pool testing program will continue in all MSAD 52 schools. I have the data that I've shared each week, or each board meeting rather. And let's see, Chicago County continues to be high, but we've seen a change in the number of MSAD 52 students who are vaccinated. That has been pretty steady at 45 to 49%, and now it has jumped up to 50 to 54% of MSAD 52 students vaccinated. The vaccination rate by town has remained the same for all three of our towns. In Green, that's 64%. In Leeds, it's 62%, and in Turner, it's 65%. And then number of positive cases since our last board meeting: at GCS, 8, at LCS, 8, at TPS, 15, at TES, 2, at TMS, 5, and at the high school, 10.
Thank you. That brings us to public comment. And I will, as I have been doing, I'll just do a quick reminder on our public comment policy. During the time allotted for public, and I'll paraphrase a little bit, I see some familiar faces, so I'm sure folks are familiar with this at this point. During the time allotted for public participation, members of the public may speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the schools, except for personal matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students, which shall be addressed through established policies and procedures. The following guidelines shall apply to public participation at board meetings. Citizens and employees of the school unit are welcome to participate as provided in this policy. Others may be recognized to speak at the chair's discretion. Individual employees and/or employee groups will not be permitted to discuss matters for which complaint or grievance procedures are provided. The chair may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic, and we've settled on 5 minutes there. In the event of a sizable audience, the chair may require persons interested in speaking to sign up so they may be called on in a fair and efficient manner. During the time set aside for public participation, the chair will be responsible for recognizing all speakers who must identify themselves as they begin talking. Speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. All speakers are to address the chair and direct questions or comments to particular board members of the superintendent only with approval of the chair. Requests for information or concerns that require further research may be referred to the superintendent to be addressed at a later time. Members of the board and the superintendent may ask questions of any person who addresses the board, but are expected to refrain from arguing or debating issues. Questions must be addressed through the chair. No complaints or allegations will be allowed at board meetings concerning any person employed by the school system or against particular students. Personal matters or complaints concerning student or staff issues will not be considered in a public meeting, but will be referred through established policies and procedures. In order to make efficient use of meeting time, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments to the board. The board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. The chair has the authority to stop any presentation that violates these guidelines or the privacy rights of others. Persons who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave, and the chair may request law enforcement assistance as necessary to restore order. So as we've done before, we'll have the podium available to folks if you are interested in proceeding over there and introducing yourself when you begin your comments.
Good evening, Ryan Demers, Meadow Hill Road in Green. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm here tonight for my son and his peers' future, to basically beg for you all to look into / question why the athletic director and principal of Levitt will not let 2 young men play lacrosse for Edward Little this season. Just a quick history of why I'm here. My son Maddox and his friend Mo Mayo, they are student athletes at Levitt. They started playing lacrosse at the Auburn Rec Department in 3rd grade. This sport, after football, is their second love. As we all know, about the time lacrosse was going to start in 2019, we were all hit with life-altering pandemic. This especially hit hard for all high school athletes across the country and the world. These 2 young men have missed the last 2 seasons of a sport that, in my opinion, they could possibly move on to the next level after high school. This is apparent as you all want options available for your children, meaning athletic scholarships possible. During this period, I do not see the need to push the issue because everything was still in disarray. So this year I made a call to Ms. LaRoche to make a meeting with Mr. Shaw. So we did so on December 9th, 2021. We met knowing I only had about 4 or 5 months to get answers on this matter. Within that meeting, I had a lot of financial stuff, too much on the AD's plate, affects long-term political problems. Upon going into this meeting, I did as much homework as possible. By saying able, I was blocked by EL staff saying that they're not to talk about lacrosse with any Levitt player. A month later, on January 21st, I left a message for Mr. Shaw. A few days later, Mr. LaRoche called me back advising he doesn't have a definitive answer yet. And he said it didn't look promising. So again, the conversation led to him, he has too much on his plate. On February 3rd, Ms. LaRoche called me again and stated that the answer is a definite no. And again stated to me that it's just too much on his plate and it could be a political problem. So in my research and homework, I contacted Jeremy Gatton, the recreational director of the city of Auburn. I asked if he could look into the number of players in the towns of Green, Turner, and Leeds that play in the Auburn rec system. This resulted in 1 student in Turner, 5th and 6th grade, 1 student in 1st and 2nd grade, no students in 3rd, 4th, or the 7th, 8th grade, equaling 2 students out of 70 plus that were signed up. With that said, Ms. LaRoche admitted that this year there would be no financial burden for Levitt Area High School. And then these numbers, I don't think are going to be in the next few years. I did, however, reach out to the MPA and spoke with Michael Bisson, assistant executive. He does not remember in his tenure anyone having to go to the school board in order to get a student to play a sport for a co-op. He states this is usually passes at the athletic director's level. At this point in time, I didn't feel the need to go to the superintendent because Ms. LaRoche stated that it'd be the same answer. I then reached out to former superintendents and principals, and they've never heard of this before. By no means am I here to bash Ms. LaRoche. I consider him a good friend. I've known him for a long time. So I tried to do everything right and go in the chain of command. So that's why I'm here tonight. Basically, in closing, I hope you guys can take a closer look into this. Time's running out for them to get on the team, getting into spring. And their high school day is a number. I feel that sports for these kids, it directly affects their mental stability, happiness, structure, and drive. This is very unfortunate. And when I say political plate, that was meant to say that my son and Bo are pretty good athletes, and they thought they were going to take spots away from the kids that are there now. The numbers right now are really low across the country for all sports. And these kids, they grew up with Maddox and Bo. They know how they are as athletes and people. The parents know them, so there would be nothing that would ever kick back to that. So basically, hopefully you guys can look into this and see if there's anything else I could do. The only other thing would be, I guess, appeal to the MPA. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, Jimmy Childs. First, I want to thank all the educators and everybody for doing what they do for our children. Thank you very much. And time and time again, I've asked the policy committee, or how could the policy committee look at, the mask policy and the questions that we have. And I guess it was right in front of me all along, policy BGR. Any individual, parent, whatever, can submit their concerns or suggestions to either for the policy and basically like their, so I have that here. So is this the right venue to have the policy committee convene and look at the stuff that I have and then get back to us? Because I talked to all these people, Ms. Brandt, the teachers, principals, and everybody's concerned about the well-being of our children, and I know that to be true. A lot of people, you guys are parents and grandparents, And this is why I'm doing this, is because I am very concerned about the well-being of my kid, along with other people. And I've spent 6 months in research. I spent the last 2 weeks, well, the week before last, 2 weeks straight. I didn't work or nothing. I just put this stuff together for you guys. Ms. Brandt has one. I talked to her today. I guess she hasn't really looked at it yet, which is, it is what it is. She's got a lot going on, but this is so important. That this information is important. There's stuff in there that, you know, and I realize, you know, it's hard to change your mind because the CDC has these recommendations. But just to remind you of, you know, of, and I know you guys already know it. I ain't saying this to be, you know, whatever. It's that you guys, you're, I'll just read it right here. Your legal status is to the state constitution, state statutes, and regulations to the Board of Education. I called the Board of Education myself, and they said all they have is recommendations about the masking. So there's no regulation, it's a recommendation. And the state constitution still, Article 1, 2, and 3 is life, liberty, pursuit, happiness. Like, that's why it's 1, 2, and 3. It's very important. Like, all these truckers in Canada that are fighting for our freedoms and stuff, I mean, these people are doing that not just because, you know, there's a lot of people doing it, and that's what I feel like we're doing here. We're fighting for our constitutional freedoms, you know, our medical, I mean, the medicalness of our kids is up to us. The science, they're saying the science is changing, the CDC, but in the end, the science is never going to change. It's going to be the same science that was there all along is what they're going on. The political science right now is changing for some people. And, I mean, there's the Congress of the United States wrote into the CDC, and they have all kinds of questions that they want answered. This is in there, too. They have questions they want answered along with all of us. You know, I've talked to our own state representatives, and they are questioning this too. They are looking into this stuff. They are looking into all kinds of stuff. I said, why are these superintendents all resigning? They said they're resigning all over the place, but for whatever reason it is, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on with this ESSER money that we don't know and everything. And I want the best for our school. I want the best for our kids. I want the best for my kid. I love my kid very much. I know you guys love your kids, and the CDC recommendations, it's just that's a recommendation. It's not a regulation. It's not a state statute. It's not a constitutional right. Constitutional right, you know, life, liberty, and happiness. Liberty means a lot of things. It means that people can't arbitrarily interfere with our life. It means due process. Respected people can lose their job if they violate somebody's due process. Respected people can lose their job, you know, just because they violate somebody's due process. I mean, that's how liberty works. You can't pick and choose your liberty. You know, and I respect everything you guys are doing, but it would be much respect if, like, the policy committee could just look at this stuff and get back to us. I mean, this is the, you know, you got all the mission statements, and we will be informed thinkers, and we will be, I mean, just, this mission statement is you're not going by informed thinkers, and what is it? It's research-based decision-making. Research-based decision-making. This is the less research-based decision policy that's ever been to this school, and we should research it on both sides. On both sides. So when the CDC's thing changes, but the evidence never changed, you know, it's never changed. It's all been that way all along. You know, so is this the right time to have the policy committee look at this, Ms. Bullard? I mean, not right now, but like I can.
Let's follow up on that. The policy that you, I guess I'm a little unclear as to whether you are wishing to submit something. We have a policy around complaints, like if that's what your desire is, or what
the mass policy. I would just like it looked into to like of the adverse effects that it can have on the educational part of it. I mean, and all of that, and then. You know, I mean, I understand that you're probably not just going to change your mind because people are so worried about what the CDC says, but they're not.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to clarify what your request is, whether it's a complaint or whether it's.
My request is to have the policy committee to look at the suggestions and concerns that I have to do with the mass policy, go over it, convene. You can convene with her. It says she's got the information too. Can convene with me if you would like to, you know, and then it says the policy committee together with the superintendent will be responsible for reviewing and researching suggestions, you know, and then you can put it on the board to get back to us. And even we can't wait 2-3 weeks for the CDC to change their minds. So I guess.
Yep. So you are welcome to give me that information. Yes.
Thank you. Give it right to you or the policy people?
You can give it right to me. That's fine. Thank you.
My name is Crystal Nicholas from Green. How do we answer our children when they come to us for protection from the breath bullies and tell us that they cannot breathe, their head aches, they are dizzy, or perhaps they plainly state, I did not have enough oxygen to stay conscious and I began to black out? How do we respond? Well, if we are the governing body of MSAD 52, we do not respond. We ignore these children. We marginalize them and their advocates and demean their injury by never acknowledging the abuse these children are suffering. This guarantees that your child's politically inconvenient harm is documented only as an anecdote and never as evidence. The following is an excerpt from a letter written by my son last summer, thanking our superintendent for her gracious permission to matriculate. He begins by relating his delight with all of his classes and goes on to say, as much as I enjoyed school, I did not enjoy the mask wearing. I was barely able to tolerate it, and I did so only out of respect for the rules and in order to take my classes. After thinking over this past year, I've concluded that it was not the right of the school to deprive me of the air I needed to breathe in order to learn. On several occasions, I started to faint, but I did not tell anyone, as I did not want to trouble anyone, and I feared that I would have gotten myself into trouble. Here I would like to ask, are children being encouraged to report harms from masking, or are they being encouraged to go along with it? Back to the letter. Other times I felt sickened or dizzy, which signifies low oxygen levels. Now I realize how important it is to make my voice heard. I also realize they were probably unaware of this, but now that you are, there'll be no more mask requirements because it is just too dangerous. Here ends that excerpt. Too dangerous indeed. Why should another child get hurt? Here a teenager outmaneuvers his elders with simple logic. But children are so resilient, we're told. They are resilient to oxygen deprivation. They are resilient to asphyxiation, mental health consequences, speech delays, what have you. There are two things, however, that children are decidedly not resilient to. COVID, of course. The other, the cowardice and incompetence of those who are supposed to be protecting our children. These are the ones who repeat their tired doublespeak phrases such as, nobody likes masks. This meaningless virtue signaling chant may help some to feel less despicable, but it provides no immediate relief for the child having trouble or breathing in bacteria or suffering from implemented suffocation. I also hear these people say, I just want to see kids in school, which translates to, I'm not brave enough to stand up for a child's human right not to be smothered or tortured whilst pursuing their education. Do your part is another hackneyed phrase that means my fear trumps your consequence from a real outcome. Remember, at MSAD 52, slow suffocation has always been safe and effective, and these mandates have always been about freedom. And shall we have a continuation of these attacks on our children's bodies and health? Or is there a brave, honest board member who will motion to discuss the harms suffered by our children? We demand that you, our elected representatives, address our children's injuries and injustices. My thanks.
Hello, my name is Una Shostak. I live in Green. Masks are harmful. I know this because I've experienced it. You need to stop ignoring us. Children have a voice and it needs to be heard. Thank you.
I'm Bob Manchester. I live right here in Turner. And I noticed that the superintendent had a very nice PowerPoint presentation, and she talked about what informs the budget. And she did have a line in there about the children, the students. And she did say that the idea of the budget is to support those students in their academic, social, emotional, and physical areas. But obviously, mask wearing affects all of those in a very negative way. and it especially affects the smallest children. We know very well, I mean, it's pretty common sense that mask wearing would definitely affect the speech of a child, and clearly the budget she has proposed doesn't have nearly enough money in it for speech therapists, because those are the students that are going to be so dramatically affected by mask wearing. And psychologists as well. There's a line in there for psychologists, but it sounds like the emotional and social damage to children from mask wearing could be pretty significant. So the budget's going to have to increase dramatically in those two categories. Now, the countries across the world are dropping mask mandates. States around the United States are dropping mask mandates. Cities and towns are dropping mask mandates. So I don't know why we're clinging to the mask mandate here in SAD 52. Now, I understand that there's a dollar incentive from the government, I guess, to keep masks on, but I do plead with you to consider the students and their well-being rather than the money. So the damage that we're talking about can be long-term in some of those four categories: academic, social, emotional, and physical. So I don't know what you're experiencing now with regards to depression and suicide at SAD 52. I can only imagine you could be seeing a spike in those things. And that's another reason why you're going to have to increase your budget dramatically for psychological counseling. So once again, you really should consider the damage. And what these other folks have said, I agree with totally. So you've really got to, the CDC recommendations are just that, recommendations. So you really should get strong and vote to eliminate those masks. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Casey Blake. I am from here in Turner. My daughter is with me tonight. I'll let her introduce herself when she speaks. I come to you this evening for the first time. This is my first board meeting. I've done the virtual thing once before. But first off, I don't know, I want to say thank you. As I introduce myself, I want to say thank you to all you guys. I know this is not anything that no one in this world imagines, so on and so forth. But that survey showed it, and I know about the importance of board members, administrators, principals, teachers, everybody in this district. We moved here last year from Sabatis, and I will tell you hands down, in the middle of the pandemic, the transition was the best I could have ever imagined. And that goes to you, ladies and gentlemen, your staff, and how you guys manage your stuff. So I just want to say that first and foremost, because I know you guys probably don't expect to hear that all the time, so it gets old. The other reason I'm here is as a father of 3 children, 2 of which are in the school district, one at Turner Primary and one at Turner Elementary School. We've kind of come to the end of the road, the crossroads here of having to have masks on. And I'm not going to repeat exactly what everyone just said. The gentleman before me said that. I'll just use Switzerland, for example. Switzerland, one of the leading countries in the entire world when it comes to health and medicine in that industry and field, leads the world hands down. And they've voted to completely eliminate all restrictions across the board. There is no more COVID-19 in Switzerland. in terms of restrictions. There still may be the cases and the hospitalizations, but there's no more restrictions because they know from their country that we're coming to the end of the road here. So I implore any of you on the board this evening, and I ask the chair in my question to be handed to the board, that somebody would motion and with integrity second to have a vote immediately this evening to remove the mandated masks for MSAD 52 and change it to an optional masking option, where that gives the parents now the right and the responsibility to make those decisions for our children. Thank you for your time this evening, and I'll turn it over to my daughter. Let's see. Can I grab this? Is that okay?
My name is Amelia Blay, and I am from Turner. I do not like wearing masks in school. Because
What have you told me before? When was the last time you remember?
I am waiting for the day when all stores and schools will not let everyone wear masks, and
You're doing great. So, it sounds like you're tired. Do you and you don't remember the last time that you were in school where you didn't have to wear a mask?
well, before I moved to Turner, I was in Sabattis, and it all started in first grade, and it's been a very long time.
What grade are you in now?
Third.
Third grade. And how many different? So you've gone from Sabattis to Turner Primary School to now Turner Elementary School. So you've been to 3 different schools wearing a mask. Sounds like it's almost tired. It sounds like it's not bad though.
Yes.
Yeah. That's our fun. Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys.
Okay, Catherine Libby from Green, with now 2 kids in the district because my 8th grader decided finally that enough was enough and saw me going at these school board meetings, the countless amount of hours that I spent speaking to the parents in the district, maintaining the Facebook page, reaching out to principals, having meetings with principals, having meetings with superintendent, emailing the superintendent, all of the research that they see me doing, notebooks of research, about our district, other districts, what people are doing, what other states are doing, and he finally at 13 years old was like, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm not, and he hit that wall and he stopped going to school and he finally was like, you can homeschool me. And so this was our first week and it's been exciting and he is so pumped that he doesn't have to wear a mask, and I feel great that I have one less kid that is having to endure that this school year. And my other 2 are still at Levitt and in 7th grade, but of course still on the we should be able to choose, especially when as a parent we teach our kids all of the things that we would like them to know, important things like our constitutional rights, as Jimmy stated, and I have spoken to law enforcement and masking is not a law, so they don't actually have to wear one. It's just unfortunate that you have the authority that you have to put this on them, and then the principals have the authority over kids to do this. But these kids don't want to be doing it. I have several kids that would be willing to do a walkout or a walk-in maskless, but they're trying to have respect for administration. I sat down with both Ms. Mates and Mr. Shaw to go over options, to try and talk about our concerns even more and give them the heads up of what we might be looking at doing. But I put the pause on that and instead tried to get actual people emails. So our total at the moment is, I think, 161 students so far that I've been able to get in contact with via their parents, and they've sent me emails, which I can certainly at some point print out and show you if you'd like, of all of the kids across all the schools that do not wish to have masking, and that's only in a week's time frame that I've been able to reach out. I didn't have Google survey that I could send out to everyone. So we want to keep kids in school. We already know that 15% would have to have positive cases for us to possibly have to close a school, which I understand is a huge concern. But if you actually do any of the math that Kim had just said about all of the cases just for, I'm assuming the last week or last 2 weeks, the biggest one is Turner Primary at 5.5%, the smallest one being 0.77% of the student body population between staff and students. And actually those were just the student numbers, that wasn't the staff numbers, that's a different number. Again, many pages of research. I know all of these things. I might know more than other people if we quiz them. So that in and of itself. And then I'm still waiting on some more final numbers because I don't know exactly how many people are enrolled in pooled testing. Some are vaxxed and some are not vaxxed, of course. So just looking at some of the numbers for this, again, the 3 factors are vaccinated, enrolled in pooled testing, or have had COVID in the last 90 days. Of course, that would be a rolling time period. So if you'd like to see this math, I can certainly give it to you guys in the email format, but just to go over a little bit of it right now. 164 kids at Green, 87 at Leeds, Tripp 139, Turner Primary 133, Turner Elementary 138, Levitt 280, approximately of the kids that are vaccinated, meaning right out the gate, those kids are all exempt from having to quarantine unless they're actually positive. Then if we tack on any of the pool testing, which again, these numbers would be a little bit different because we would obviously not double count the same student that's already vaxxed. Those numbers are looking at like 97 for Green, 140 for Leeds, Turner Primary 81, Turner Elementary 78, Turner Middle School 84, Levitt 164. Again, so we don't know if those are all the same numbers as the vaxxed or if obviously some of them are probably unvaxxed, which means those portion of people would not have to quarantine as well. And then if we add in the COVID numbers, we're looking at, I didn't add in the ones yet from tonight because I was doing it on the fly. We've got 33 at Green, 14 at Leeds, 29 at Tripp, Turner Primary is 40, Turner Elementary is 35, and Levitt's 83, again, not counting the numbers right now. So that, all of those numbers are all of the kids that would be exempt from having to quarantine unless they actually contracted COVID. So that is a huge, and if we took all that...
We're at 5 minutes.
We're at 5 minutes, okay. So those are the kids that you're keeping in school, so.
Dawn Parker from Leeds. I have 2 children in the district and then I have one in a different district, and I appreciate everything that you guys are doing, but as you can see, there's a lot of parents doing a lot of research, and doesn't seem to be reciprocated. We get a lot of just empty stares and no response. So I am really happy. My youngest child goes to Phippsburg Elementary School, and they announced today that they will be going to optional masking. So I'm hopeful that that might come down the road to us here. But the one thing that I wanted to point out is back August 19th, Richard had stated at the end of the board meeting that all adverse effects would be addressed. I've asked time and time again via email, which have gone unanswered, how are those being documented? They're being swept under the rug, so how are you addressing them if they're not being talked about? We stand up here every board meeting and talk about it. Nobody responds. They're not being addressed. So just a little food for thought. I am definitely for unmasking our kids.
My name is Anthony Shostak. I live in Green. Don't worry, I will not dwell on masks. You have already heard and ignored the arguments that prove that mandatory masking should have ended long ago. I'll simply reiterate that mandatory mask policy is morally wrong, lacks scientific basis, and is fundamentally an emotional reaction with fear at its foundation. It flies in the face of the golden rule to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, by instead doing unto others as you feel convenient and as assuages your fears. The superintendent and board would do well to recognize this and allow masking to be optional now. I want instead to shift to the survey about the superintendent search, but to do so, I need to tell you about a young man, a friend of mine named Steve. Steve was an accomplished trombonist and a gifted composer. He was an amateur computer scientist and a long-distance cyclist. He was handsome and funny. He went to college on a full merit scholarship. At the age of 19, Steve ended his life at the end of a short rope tied to the pipes in the ceiling of his apartment. Why? Because Steve was gay, and he was taught by identity politics that all of the things that made him a special individual to all of his friends were unimportant because his gay identity was the only meaningful one. This convinced him that his parents could not see past this and continued to love him. Steve, my friend, was killed by identity politics. And so it was with some alarm that I saw among the questions posed to us in the superintendent survey evidence that the same woke politics have infiltrated MSA 52 and will have influence on the selection of the next superintendent. Let me be clear to all of you, identity politics is toxic poison. They strip people like my friend Steve of their individuality and dignity by reducing them to mere components of a group. A group, I might add, is always based on immutable characteristics like gender or race. And those groups are always organized into oppressors and the oppressed, usually without any meaningful justification. No amount of training in LGBTQIA+ identity will give anyone the education I had simply by being Steve's friend and witnessing the fatal influence of identity politics and watch them resonate and echo so as to continue their damage and harm. In addition to witnessing how woke politics destroyed the life of my friend and cut an unhealable wound in his family, I have seen indoctrinated managers poison their workplaces so thoroughly by stifling open communication and free thought and mandating demeaning and authoritative sensitivity and awareness training that they drive good, excellent, experienced employees into early retirement. Anyone who wants that for our school district is putting their pet politics above the health of our schools and the education of our students. But I fear that the indoctrination goes deeper than our school board just being interested in the wokeness of superintendent candidates. Examine one answer option provided for question 4, which asks stakeholders to identify skills or competencies most important that address equity in the schools, such as gender, ethnic origin, and economic status. I am sorry to inform you that gender, ethnic origin, and economic status do not constitute an issue. Those are things every single person has. Either the persons framing the question didn't understand to, or perhaps more charitably did not care to, write intelligibly, or they actually subscribe to the woke political theories that merely having gender, ethnic origin, and economic status are issues in and of themselves, demanding the time and mental energy of a superintendent. Neither of those things bodes well for our search. It is not out of fear of gays or hatred of minorities that I utterly reject identity politics and urge you to do the same. Rather, it is out of respect and compassion for the people they diminish and out of an awareness of the irreparable damage that they will invariably inflict on both individuals and our community. The only place racial, ethnic, sexuality awareness tuned in this or training has in the search for a new superintendent is having it serve as a red flag indicating that a candidate with them is unsuitable. Thank you.
Anybody else that would like to address the board this evening? If not, thank you, folks. We will move on to old business, which we don't actually have any of. So that brings us to the consent agenda, and I will entertain a motion. That was perhaps preemptive, because we don't have anything on that. No, that was just me turning the page. Sorry about that. So we'll go on to new business and 10.1, instructional nominations. We do have one there, so Richard, if you're interested in that. Richard, do we have a second? Second from Yuri. All those in. We skipped a step. Would you like to read the nomination on that? We're
Yes, thank
clearly
you.
enthusiastic tonight.
So Principal Mates writes that Anthony Crosby currently serves as an Ed Tech and Behavior Support Program at TMS. His knowledge of the program, staffing needs, and behavior needs of the students that the program serves make him an excellent candidate for this position. His positive energy and willingness to take this on mid-year will also serve the entire special ed department well. We are excited to have him join our teaching staff. And I would add to that when I had the opportunity to talk to him, his enthusiasm and his depth of knowledge about students and supportive behaviors was great.
So we had a motion and a second on this. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. That brings us to item 10.2, and that is the update by the Assistant Superintendent on ESSER funds. Teresa. You ready?
Good evening. I wanted to provide an update to you on the ARP, or ESSER 3, grant that was awarded to our district. As you may recall, our total grant award was $2,473,733.03. 20% of this grant, or $494,746.61, must be spent to address what the grant calls learning loss. As part of this application process, all districts were required to offer opportunities for meaningful consultation from the school community. For our district, the following means were used to share information and gather input. We posted a notice on our district website. Community forums were held in our 3 towns. In Greene, a forum was held on July 21st. In Turner, a forum was held on July 22nd. And in Leeds, a forum was held on August 11th. A survey was sent to all families and staff. From the survey results, we had 170 individuals that completed the survey with 207 suggestions for addressing learning loss specifically and 289 ideas for the remaining funds. One email was sent directly to me with suggestions for the use of funds. A brainstorming sheet was created for administrators and directors. A presentation to the school board about this meaningful consultation and the ideas that were generated took place in September of 2021. Additionally, the funds must be spent on projects that meet one of 20 categories. I'll review those categories for you now. Any activity that is authorized by ESEA, any activity authorized by the Individuals with Disabilities Act, any activity authorized by the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, by the Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act, by the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, coordinating preparedness and response efforts of the LEA with state, local, tribal, and territory public health departments and other relevant agencies to improve coordinated responses among such entities to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19, to provide principals and other school leaders with the resources necessary to address the needs of their individual schools, activities to address the unique needs of low-income students, students with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and children and youth in foster care. The funds could be spent on a project that would include developing and implementing procedures and systems to improve the preparedness and response efforts of the LEAs, training and professional development for staff on sanitation and minimizing the spread of infectious diseases, purchasing supplies to assist with this, planning for, coordinating, and implementing activities during long-term school closures, including providing meals to students, technology for online learning, guidance for carrying out requirements under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and ensuring that other education services could continue. Purchasing educational technology, including hardware, software, and connectivity. Providing mental health services and supports. Planning and implementing activities related to summer learning and enrichment and summer supplemental after-school programs, including providing classroom instruction or online learning during the summer months. Addressing the academic impact of lost instruction. School facility repairs and improvements to enable operation of schools to reduce risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards. Inspection, testing, maintenance, repair, replacement, and upgrade projects to improve the indoor air quality, including mechanical and non-mechanical heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. Developing strategies and implementing public health protocols, and other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation and continuity of services. So all the information that was gathered as part of the meaningful consultation was put together. The grant was written and submitted. I received some feedback and rewrote the grant as requested, and the final grant was approved on December 6th. I wanted to review some of the projects that were suggested and were written into the grant. I'm going to give you some dollar figures, but please keep in mind that for the cost of some items, it may fluctuate depending on when the materials are purchased, rising costs for equipment, and availability of items and personnel. $632,000 was set aside for after-school programs, tutoring, summer programs, materials to increase student engagement, and these materials include Osmo, which is taking place at Leeds and Turner Primary School, Rise at Green Central School, and a broadcast studio at Turner Elementary School, as well as materials for targeted instruction, such as leveled literacy intervention kits, number worlds, and connected math at our elementary and middle schools. A project totaling approximately $325,303 was written for technology in the forms of devices, licensing, cases, and additional access points. $523,000 was set aside for cleaning, repairs, and upgrades to facilities. This includes windows, doors, and access paths for our schools. $256,422.80 for the purchase of 2 new buses, as well as a communication system which will help us track students on our transportation and provide timely information to our transportation department as well as families. $120,000 for a replacement intercom system at Levitt, as well as some additional printers. $273,000 for temporary nurses to support our nursing staff. $79,000 for improved distribution of meals, and Dave Roberts was able to purchase some refrigeration units to help with that. $130,000 for staff support, such as stipend days so that teachers can plan, and improved methods of staff evaluation. Remember, one of the categories was for principals to support their staff. We are implementing an online module in hopes that we'll be able to give our staff more timely and effective feedback, as well as $32,000 for grant management. So that is an overview of where we stand right now. We have begun to start spending some of the money. We are in the process of getting quotes for some of the projects. And I think if the board can remember, I think it was about a month ago, you voted to increase the substitute rate of pay by 25% for the remainder of this year. Some of that money will be rewritten, and we will make some adjustments within the projects. And I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Questions for Teresa on this? Jessica. Sorry.
I know at our last board meeting, there was a letter that was sent in regarding education at TMS.
Yes.
And we had talked about seeing what options we had there. Any feedback on that?
I've talked with both Kim and Dean about that. It will not meet the criteria because where I listed those 20 categories, it really needs to fall in the impact of COVID-19. And so a project of that nature was not the result of COVID-19. If we look at doors and windows, those fall into the projects because of the air quality and also working to seal up the building. But I didn't answer your answer the way you wanted, did I?
Kim.
So we are going to reschedule a PTB meeting, and we're going to revisit, in addition to the kitchen project, you probably remember when we had all the full district assessed for facilities needs, there's a large list of facilities needs, and the board did the difficult work of prioritizing which to move forward on, and did that. And so there's still a list of other items that the board needs to revisit because there's still needs in the district. So in addition to the kitchen, we have several fields that are going to need work, as well as some other projects. So
Paving projects.
I'm sorry?
Paving
Yes,
projects.
exactly. So we will, I'm looking at Dean, we will be scheduling a PTB to take a look at that list of projects that didn't meet the top priority, but that are still out there, and have discussion.
Other questions for Teresa? If not, thank you for the recap. And your intention is to update us kind of periodically as something like the sub-pay changes those numbers?
Yes, I know that it's the middle of February, but we really just received the approval, and then we had to enter all the budget lines so that we can make sure everything fit. So with this particular federal grant, you have to reopen it. So I wanted to make sure that I've actually met with Business Manager Flanagan and my assistant, and we've gone through all the projects to determine which ones we're going to get quotes on, and then the grant will be reopened to rewrite it so that it will include those pieces as well.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more follow-up?
Jessica?
Sorry. So it was stated in public comments about there being funding tied to our masking policy. Can you address that? Because it's something that's coming up a lot.
Yep, so the requirements of the grant are that you have meaningful consultation and that you are able to document your meaningful consultation and that you provide a return to school, safe opening of schools plan. And we have done both of those. It is not tied to, there is not a masking requirement, and if we are not getting money because we have the masking piece in place. The masking piece is part of our safe return to schools that the board approved. They're not connected.
Thank you. That brings us to item 10.3, and item 10.3 is to act on the list of continuing contract teachers who will be issued annual salary agreements for the 22-23 school year as presented by the superintendent of schools, and to authorize payment of salaries.
I would move that this act,
We have,
that we do this.
we have a motion. Do we have a second? Yuri, discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Do we have any items of other business that we need to take up this evening? Richard?
In regard to the kitchen at Trip, are there any places in the budget where that is listed? It wasn't discussed in your budget overview.
No, it wasn't discussed because it's a large project. So PTB needs to take a look at that project in its entirety and decide how or when to move forward with it.
Is there time to get that into the budget for next year?
So there's always time. It's a large number that the committee would need to discuss. But yes, there's time if that were the decision.
Okay.
So there will be more information on that once PTV meets and has an opportunity to look and refresh those project quotes that we had around that. I'm thinking we're all pre-pandemic too, so that would be something we'd want to revisit when we went through the bond round. So those numbers may not be quite as accurate as they were when we first created those kinds of things. Anything else for items of Jessica?
It's going to be a pain today. So I have a question. So when we took our last vote to continue with our masking policy, we did that stating something along the lines that we were going to continue following CDC and Maine DOE guidelines, correct? Does that mean if CDC and MDOE or MDOE guidelines change, do we have to re-vote, or will we just stay in alignment?
I think the board has latitude to proceed in whatever manner it chooses to. And Kim can probably speak to this. I mean, obviously this is in response to all the conversations about, okay, so, and we've alluded to them through the whole process that, okay, so when do we get to take the masks off? When are the folks who have medical expertise indicating that that would be appropriate? So I think, Kim, if you want to, what we've done thus far, not to make this more complicated than it needs to be, is Kim has recounted her recommendation for moving forward to the board, and that has to this point been in alignment with Maine CDC and the Department of Education's standard operating procedures. So I presume that the superintendent will continue to report out on as those things change. It certainly sounded from those reports this week that it will continue to change and continue to change rapidly. So I would anticipate those reports to continue, and then we as a board may act accordingly.
Did you understand what I was
If that answered your question.
I did. So because we're in budget season, we have so it's February break next week. Then we have a budget workshop on March 3rd, and then we have another one on March 10th. So it's anticipated that sometime around after the first week in March, there may be movement to make a decision. So we won't be waiting periods of time, right? The board will be meeting every single week. So that if that happens, we will, within less than a week, the board will be together to take action if they choose to do so.
So can I?
Yes, sir.
So can then I give a question to the chair to present to the board? Can we have a vote this evening changing immediately the choice for optional masking? Because it sounds like, can I ask Superintendent, if you could address Superintendent Brandt, was she part of that conference call with the CDC director that had met, I believe it was either today or yesterday, with local superintendents? Were you part of that, Superintendent Brandt?
Right, so those, I mean, and I think that's what the superintendent reported out on earlier, those updates from the main CDC and that indication that those recommendations will most likely be changing.
Okay, so we follow them as a recommendation. They're not like it's been stated. It's the main Department of Education, I believe, if I'm quoting correctly, gives the individual district the opportunity to vote and make that their own policy within, in our case, Turner, Leeds, and Green. So you individually as a board do not need to technically, I mean, we did it within standards because the whole world was doing it because we didn't know what the hell was going on, but, excuse me, but now to this point where we've kind of got to where, and they're even considering readjusting their policy, I don't think that we're going to February break. I mean, if you're gonna change the policy tonight's the evening to change it, so you guys, when we fast forward past February break, now is the time to get that all squared away, so when kids come back to school after February break, we didn't have to wait. We don't want to be the last district to just say, okay, well, we just did everything, you know, that we did. We are at that point, right? We all pretty much agree we're at that point. So if we can make the choice tonight, we have a lot of support here. I know the teachers are tired. I talked to teachers and assistants, everyone's tired. And I think tonight would be the opportunity for a motion and a vote to end this.
So I appreciate your comments. I would remind folks that we also just conducted a survey within the district where the majority of respondents were in favor of continuing the masks.
And that's all changing, correct?
So I'm not looking for a debate tonight. The board has the authority to proceed in the manner that it so chooses. And I think we've also indicated that the superintendent.
It's not a debate.
No.
You work for us, not the CDC.
No.
It's a
Folks,
recommendation.
not acceptable.
It's a simple vote. You
No.
can't even at least give us the time to vote on it.
So do any other board members have any items of business they wish to consider this evening?
Can somebody motion to take a vote, please, in second? I mean, why are we not?
So that's up to board members to do that.
Yeah.
And interrupting doesn't add anything to the proceedings. Thank you.
Take time to take into what we even said, or any of these people said. Just moved on. Yeah, that's the way you make.
Do you have a hand out here that would wish to speak?
I wish to ask, it appears that you want to wait for guidance from the CDC. Does that mean that the children that are struggling now to breathe are to be ignored? Or will the board recognize those children? Will that be talked about? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So I know that you just said about the survey and stuff, but I guess my biggest thing is, okay, so if those are all the people that like to continue masking their children, I don't understand why you can't just put out that it's optional, because those 63, 65, 61%, whatever it was, people can still mask their children. And I'm almost willing to bet that those are the children that are probably exempt from having to quarantine unless they get COVID in the first place. The remaining, like I've done the math for you guys, if you just look at the math, is probably all of our kids that don't want a mask. So we agreed to have our kids quarantined if they are close contact. Why can't you just give that power back to us? We're the parents, we're saying it's okay. So we're telling you board members that that pool of kids that are gonna have to quarantine, that you so desperately wanna keep in school, they're our kids. Let us make that choice. Please, someone put it for optional. Please, come on, they're our kids.
Yes, sir.
We're not asking you to abolish masks. You're not saying that, you know, that when a kid comes to school, if you make it optional and they say, no, you can't wear that mask in school. That's not what we're asking. We're asking you to vote just to make it optional for these children. I have 2 young kids in this school district, and they are affected by this. All of these kids and all of these teachers and staff are also affected by it. And it does seem like the few meetings that I've listened to or been to, it just gets brushed under the rug. It's hard to hear.
I'd like to add something as well. The
Yes.
survey that went out, the results are inconclusive because she doesn't know how to calculate the percentage that she had to have in order for it to be effective. So that is neat. You need to do it again and just ask if people support optional masking.
And don't ask for their
Okay,
name.
let's
Yes,
not,
don't ask for personal information either.
let's not interrupt. That's not really helping anything. Anything board members wish for any other items of action? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Richard, do we have a second? Do we have a second? Yuri. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Cowards! Yep, you guys are cowards, everyone.
We're not going to stop until you guys know. So maybe you can listen.